a lot, Helena, for your warm words and for your welcome. I thank for the warm welcome here to Trinidad. In general, I'm very pleased to be here. I think it was wonderful yesterday. So first let me just say that I'm, as Helena said, I'm the chief archivist of UNESCO, which means that if we talk about the Memory of the World program, which I will speak about today, I'm not in charge of the Memory of the World program. I just want to make that clear. I work closely with the colleagues, but the location, to stay in the logic of this workshop, the location of the Memory of the World program is in the communication sector of UNESCO. And a second introductory remark, I must apologize to the colleagues who were at the EMEC workshop, because some of what I have to say will be a repetition of what I said then, since I would like to introduce the Memory of the World program in general terms, and this is kind of similar, and then also I want to say something different, which is on the relation to this network, to how the Memory of the World can serve the Diasporic Literary Archives project. Well, first I should say my PowerPoint is here, so I don't need anything more. But still, let me just say, for the Memory of the World program, it has a history. Very briefly, I mean, it's not by accident that this program came to being in UNESCO in 1992. The history is, it's the mission of UNESCO, which is to create the defenses of peace in the minds of men and women. So right from the beginning of UNESCO, 1945, the organization was interested in history. It's the ICA, also in archives. The ICA was created at UNESCO in 1948, and UNESCO launched the history of mankind, which became the history of humanity later on. UNESCO also launched regional histories on Africa, on the Caribbean, and other parts of the world. And finally, as a very important collection as well, UNESCO started already in the 1950s to publish the sources to the history of different societies, and in particular to countries that were just about becoming independent. So in fact, UNESCO supported a decolonization process from the very onset, from the 1950s, and then of course up through the 1960s. Next, please. So just a special greeting to André, Albert, and Imek, and the last workshop, the Bayeux Tapestry. This is just to give an idea of the content of the registry of the Memory of the World. So of course we have there's this first cartoon on the Norman conquest and dating back from the late 11th century, and then to show a bit how diverse the register is, I also wanted to show you this coal mining painting by Yamamoto. Yamamoto was a Japanese coal miner. He started working in the mines when he was 12 years old, and when in 1904, and when he became 21, he started writing a diary. And he wrote diaries all his life, and then later on he also made paintings of life and drawings of life in the mines. And this is a very important source to understand the social and cultural conditions in the mines in the coal mines of Japan. So it's also an example of how different materials can be combined in sites on the Memory of the World list. So why was it created, the program in '92? Well, it was created to protect documentary heritage. There was a broad recognition that there was a danger for because of intervention of humanity, because of wars, because of all kinds of conflicts and looting, because of ignorance, and therefore a number of main produced problems. Also natural disasters, or floodings and fire and so forth. Bad conditions for collections of archives and documents. And further on, chemical factors like the acidity of paper that disappears, or also other kinds of material, film material that disappears. And then finally, technological changes. I'll come back to this shortly. Then, we'll go on. And then the three main objectives, therefore, were to encourage preservation, facilitate universal access, and to raise awareness. So since here in Trinidad and Tobago, I'm not going to present your own collections to you, so that would be a little absurd, but for the benefit of David and many others, I have to say that the Constantine collection, of course, is about a man who was a great cricketer. And since cricket seems to play a very important political, social and cultural role here in Trinidad and Tobago, and in other countries in the region, I wanted to stress that. And then also I'm just listing the 6 collections that are part of the Memory of the World register. I should say this is the international register, because as you'll see in a little while, there are both internationals, regionals, and national registers. Here I'm only talking about the international. And there are 6 inscriptions from Trinidad and Tobago. You can compare that to China. There are 5 from China. So you'll see Trinidad and Tobago is very active. I must say, we can congratulate the members of the Memory of the World Committee here. I think they have been extremely active. That's also why I mentioned that just last autumn there was a consultative workshop in this very spot. I don't know exactly where, at the National Archives probably, on the Memory of the World, a regional workshop here, in order to enhance the program and to get explain the processes, and to get also more inscriptions in the future. So the literary archives are, of course, just right from the beginning of the Memory of the World program, an essential element. And here I just show you 2 examples. I mean, the Jiki is, in fact, the oldest book in the world. I mean, because, it is, it's a volume of Buddhist priests' Zen teachings of Zen. And it was printed in July 1377 in what is now Korea, the Republic of Korea. And so this is the oldest movable metal type printed book. And next to it we have the 42-line Gutenberg Bible, which is from 1455. So these are both a part of the registry of the Memory of the World. Just here I'll come to all the different formats that are included in the Memory of the World. Maybe I should just add to what I said before about Trinidad and Tobago, that yesterday Professor Ramshad said that 50 years ago Trinidad and Tobago was in the Stone Age. So you can see you've come a very, very long way away from the Stone Age today with the involvement in this program. This slide is to show the different types of materials that can be included in the memory of the world. They are all relevant. I mean, whether we talk about rolls or tapes or different types of recordings or videos and films and photos, they are all relevant. What is important is what I'll come to now. It is that they have the value that justifies their presence in the register. And now we are also moving, of course, into the digital material. All kinds of supporters of tools and applications. Let's look at the different challenges that come out of this. The digital material is, as also was said yesterday and even the day before when we went to the University of the West Indies, that it is highly ephemeral. Software changes hardware, and then also there is an extreme fluidity, a flow of data. So you can put something on Twitter, on Facebook, what have you, and then you may believe that it's still there next year or in 10 years, but it's probably not. I mean, in 10 years, and this material disappears. There was a study just done in the UK about research kept in a digital way over the past 20 years. And the result of this study was that only 20% of the material actually survives. The rest disappeared because of the ephemeral nature of the support of the digital documents. So it's also there are questions of ensuring authenticity, that material is not being manipulated, that it's really what it says it is. There is a question of websites and all kind of material out there in cyberspace is extremely fragile in terms of preservation, in terms of access, in terms of trust as well. So, and then we have all kinds of copyright issues relating to this, and the protection of privacy, as we have seen with all kinds of revelations on the intelligence services and how material can be moved to places where you wouldn't want it to go, in fact. And then in order to deal with all this, UNESCO organized a conference on the digital memory of the world in 2012, and it led to the Vancouver Declaration on what can be done, in fact, to ensure the long-term preservation and access to digital material. So just a word about the structure of the memory of the world. There is an international advisory committee which is in fact taking all the important decisions. It advises the Director General of UNESCO in the conduct of the program. There's a secretariat. It's a very small secretariat, I must say. There's basically one person in Paris, 1.5 maybe, working on it. And I want to pay tribute to Joyce Springer, who is from this region, from Barbados, and who has been the program specialist for this program for the past 10 years. And on Monday, she is retiring, in fact, this Monday. So she has done a tremendous work for this. She is the secretariat, basically, of the IAC. She won't be replaced, though, I can to reassure you. otherwise, I won't go much into the structure. I'll just say there are some subcommittees, and you'll see there's one on education, and I'll come back to this in a little while. And then you'll see there are regional committees and national committees. So the memory of the world is really at 3 levels. It's national, regional, and international. So, and here, indeed, this is reflected. Here there are more than 50 national committees now, in fact, and still more being created, and 3 regional. And they then have the responsibility for those different types of registers and carrying out the program at that level, and different in the regions and at the national level. So I now move to the registry, and I hope it's clear that this is only then a part of the program. It's the most known part. It's very important, but it's not the whole thing. So the registry, that's where you put you suggest and you can have accepted archives and collections of outstanding value. And let's look at the criteria. As you will see, we have. No, I was not quite. Sorry, I was not quite finished with that. Can we go back? Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, there are 3 main universal criteria. That's the universal interest, the authenticity. It has to be. There has to be evidence that it is what it presumes to be, and it has to be unique and irreplaceable. And then we come to the specific criteria, which relate to location. Here we have 2 human rights collections, and from Cambodia and from the Republic of Korea. And I'm mentioning this also to say that the documents and the collections in the memory of the world, they are not only treasures in the sense that they are important for, they are wonderful, they're beautiful, or they are important for our identity, but it's also our memory in the sense that they also tell the story about painful chapters of our history. I mean, it's really to share our history, including what some people would like to hide, what has been hidden. We are talking about human rights violations also in Latin America, for instance, in other parts of the world where dictatorships have persecuted opponents, and then at some point in time. There is a desire in those societies to reconcile with their history, and the memory of the world is also part of that process, which is clear with those collections from Cambodia and Korea. So that was for the location, and here we have for the people, which is another of those specific criteria. We have the people who gathered as a crowd, as a mass, to state their wish for freedom in the Baltic states in 1980, to form a chain, a long human chain, and then we have the court, the Rivonia Case course against the ANC leadership, Mandela and other leaders of the ANC, so they are also in the registry. Then subjects and theme is another essential aspect here, the fall of the Berlin Wall, because of its huge significance for the world and for history, not only of Germany, but for the whole world. And then from quite another dimension, a law case in Australia, the Mabo case, which is about land rights. That was a long struggle by the militant and activists from the indigenous population, the Aboriginals in Australia, which he finally won. And then the manuscripts relating to this has become part of the registry of the world. So it's not only to celebrate a person, but it's really the subject, the theme. It's about the cause. It's about building democracy and rights for all parts of the populations. So, and it can be different. I talked about the material. We had the speech of the General de Gaulle in the 18th of June 1940, where he encouraged the French to continue the fight. That's, in fact, that very speech has not been preserved, but as close as it was possible to come to it is then part of the registry. And that can be the case sometimes, that the original is lost, and then there can't be a document that kind of substitutes it. But it has really then, there has to be a lot of evidence that it is a true copy and that it's, so it becomes unique in that sense. Well, and also the movement, the Solidarność movement in Poland is, which is also registered on a kind of a wall. In fact, it's a wall. Then finally, the social, the spiritual, the community significance. Well, here we talk about human rights, la Déclaration des droits de l'homme et du citoyen. So it's the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen in France, because of its tremendous significance for France, but and for the world. Let's move on to the future perspectives, which I think is particularly interesting here. And now I wanted to give you a broad overview of what it is, so also to show, well, how, in any case, as I see it, this list, the registry and the program could be very relevant for this project. If we look at the future perspectives, one thing I want to highlight is that UNESCO is going to discuss what is called a legal instrument, which it means a standard-setting instrument that is, in fact, it will become a recommendation. It will be discussed at the next session of the General Conference in 2015. And why is this important? Well, it gives another status to the program. It means that the member states will take more responsibility. They will report on what they have done in this field. So the content of the legal instrument, well, we don't know anything about it yet because it's a recent decision and it has not yet been prepared. So there are, in fact, possibilities of having an impact, of influencing this. It can include thoughts, reflections that are very close to concerns that you may have. So through the national commissions for UNESCO, in other ways, through the non-governmental organizations, the ICA and IFLA and others, it is possible to influence this, and well, in different ways. And the second thing I wanted to mention, persist. Well, this is for the digital archives. This is the outcome of the Digital Memory of the World Conference. There is a work now to create standards for digital records. We talked about best practices, also for digitization. And there is work going on internationally, including the ICA and IFLA and other international professional associations, and which UNESCO is coordinating. And that's another field that I think is relevant here. And then the third on this slide, the risk register. David will talk about archives at risk a bit later today. I just want to mention this in the context of UNESCO because we are aware that there is work going on in different communities, and the International Federation of Library and Library Associations, IFLA, they have launched a survey on collections, library collections at risk. So here there is indeed a possibility of creating synergies, of trying to work together. Yeah, I think this is also highly relevant. And then I'll move into the partnerships and cooperation. there is, on the slide we saw, I mentioned there is a subcommittee on education. In fact, it is a subcommittee on education and research. And I bring here to you today a special invitation from the chair of that committee, Professor Lothar Jordan. He is also the vice chair of the Memory of the World program. And I spoke to him the day before, well, in fact, the very day I left to this workshop. And he said, spoke to him about this network, and he said that it would be wonderful if the network could become a corresponding member of this subcommittee. This would mean that the network could take part in all the discussions on the activities of the committee. This committee or subcommittee, its purpose is to root the memory of the world in education and research all over the world. So this is twofold. It has to do with introducing the memory of the world concepts and themes in existing education. So it could be in heritage studies, it could be in archival or information management studies, it could be in history or many other existing studies. That's one angle, one line of action. And the other one is to create new studies, to create memory of the world studies, maybe as master's studies or international joint diplomas, or there are other ways of developing this the new memory of the world studies. So this committee, which then you are invited to be part of, it has taken an initiative to create knowledge centers, and that's a new development as well. In fact, the subcommittee, and now it is not only the subcommittee, it is also the bureau. So it is the International Advisory Committee, in fact, for the memory of the world, proposes to create knowledge centers at the international level, at regional levels, and at national levels. So at the international level, what they suggest is that it should be with the UNESCO archives and library. And then at the regional levels, well, with the regional committees for the memory of the world, and same thing for the national, I mean, with the national committees to the extent where they exist. Otherwise, there would have to be other ways of doing this. But the idea with those centers would be to collect material that is relevant at the international level, then all international material that is relevant for the memory of the world. And it would be to provide best practices and to be a place where you could go to research and study, where you could go also to get ideas on how best to conserve material, and maybe also digitization and all kinds of aspects of the Memory of the World program. It should also be awareness raising, visibility with events, with panels, with seminars on Memory of the World topics. So this could then take place at those different levels as well. This is the general proposal. The archives and library at UNESCO, we are very interested in this. It's not an easy thing to do, but we can move towards it because we already have all the memory of the world inscriptions. They're already in the archives, in fact, and we have a lot of material already. So it is something that we would like, we would love to work for, in fact, and we hope to be able to achieve. So maybe we should be inspired by your national logo. I mean, that we aspire to do this and let's achieve it. And that's our intention. So finally, well, I would really invite you to propose diasporic literary archives for inclusion in the registry. Well, that's why I have my T-shirt here. You are most welcome to do that. I hope you will. And let's go for the last year. This is just an example from the UNESCO archives. that in the UNESCO archives we also have manuscripts, and we have all kind of documents relating to writers. Chinua Achebe was a fellow at UNESCO in 1963, and we have a text from him that he wrote in his for his application, where he wrote about the importance of being aware of your own history, of the African history, of appropriating your history and your culture. And we have made this available on the website. I take this as an example because Achebe is one of those writers whose manuscripts could one day maybe be proposed for the memory of the world. So may I just end by saying that I quote Professor Ramchar, that he said yesterday that the manuscripts can help us becoming better teachers, and I think indeed that manuscripts, they can help us, and by using them, they can help us in education, research, and they can also help the societies, in fact, to become better societies, to become more inclusive, and by taking on board its memory and by highlighting it fully. So, thank you very much.